Today, the situation we find ourselves in the world is very strange, isn't it? And in many ways unique. But we can find help, and we can find help in the Bible. Here we find stories that haven't just been shared a few times recently on social media, but have been shared billions of times over almost 2,000 years and have been changing people's lives. This morning we're going to look at one from Luke chapter 24, and if you've got a Bible, I encourage you to get it afterwards and check out what's being said. Check out whether it makes sense, to you in your life, whether what I'm saying is right or wrong. You might, if you haven't got a Bible, you can find one on the internet, look up YouVersion, the Bible app, for your phone or your computer, whatever. But let's now go back in time. And we're going to meet a rather familiar, dodgy-looking character. Hi, I'm Cleopas, and this is my story. To be honest, I'm a bit embarrassed to tell it, so I hope that not too many people find out. But on the other hand, it is good news, and so I shouldn't be embarrassed about sharing the good news, should I? It was Sunday afternoon. I was with Mary, my wife, and we were walking back along the road from the city, as we often had done. But this time it was different. Those 7 miles seemed to go on forever. I remember looking down at the dust beneath our feet, dry and parched. And that's how we felt. The sun was going down, and with it, it seemed like our hopes and our dreams. I wonder if you've ever felt like that. And as we walked, we talked, and we were talking about Jesus. We were talking about following him. We were talking about how we hoped he put everything right, the new Messiah, that he would bring freedom from our suffering. And then it had all gone so wrong. Captured, flogged, killed on a cross as a common criminal. And with it our hopes and dreams. My wife Mary had been there watching. Wish I could say the same, but I was too scared, to be honest. That's no excuse, is it? And how could this happen? How could God let this happen? Have you ever asked that before? But it had happened, and he did let it happen. For a couple of days, we'd hoped that God would do something, that something dramatic would happen. But now, well, we had to be realistic, didn't we? There comes a time when you just have to look after yourself, don't you? So we left the others to it in Jerusalem, and off we set for home. Back to what was familiar and safe, I suppose. The others would have to work out what they were going to do on their own. Just wait in the city, I suppose. Well, sometimes you just have to look after number one, don't you? Although I'm not sure that's what Jesus would say. As we went, we kept on thinking, if only things had been different. Then as we walked, this traveller came up and started walking alongside us. Bit strange, really. And of course, we know now who it was, and you'll think we're stupid. But we didn't recognise it was Jesus at the time. Why didn't we recognise his voice talking to us? How could we forget what he told us about rising from the dead? I mean, he did look a bit different after his resurrection. And Mary Magdalene had struggled to recognise him at first, but she heard his voice. And then she did. And she knew, she was certain, she was in no doubt. Maybe you know that feeling. Or maybe like us, you often don't recognise Jesus or his voice. Maybe it was that we were blinded by the sun going down, literally or metaphorically, getting darker. Maybe it was just so beyond our expectations that we didn't even consider it a possibility that Jesus could be alive, that Jesus would be speaking to us, that Jesus would walk with us. I mean, why would he do that anyway? We were the ones who were walking away. We were the ones who were doubting. We were the ones who'd given up on him. It's not right, is it? Surely he should have been with them in the city. Surely he should have been with those who'd stayed and stuck with him, who believed more than we did. But there he was. And isn't it strange sometimes how Jesus turns up with the most unlikely people and most unlikely times and places? Do you know what I mean? He asked us, "What are you talking about?" We stopped. I remember thinking, what an idiot. What does he mean? What are we talking about? Thankfully, I didn't actually say that. I'm not sure that calling the Son of God an idiot would have been such a great idea, although he was called worse. Instead, I asked him, "Are you the only one who's been in Jerusalem, who doesn't know what's gone on in these last few days?" I said that to the one guy who knew more than anyone. Can you imagine how stupid I feel? And then, get this, instead of saying, "You fool," to me, or words to that effect, he says, "What things? What's been going on?" How could he say that? But I guess it was typical. Jesus always seemed to want us to work out for ourselves, to make our own minds up. He never seemed to give us straight answers. Stories, miracles, parables, work it out for yourself. You decide. I'm not going to force you to believe or to think my way. It's up to you. Do you know what I mean? So there's us telling Jesus what's happened to him. Yeah, Cleopas and Mary. What a pair of donkeys, eh? How could we fail to see? And yet he still didn't tell us who he was. I wonder why he kept on like that. But sometimes God doesn't make it obvious to us, does he? No, Jesus just kept the conversation going. It was almost as if he enjoyed talking to us and listening to us. It was almost as if he wanted to spend time with us. Do you know what I mean? And then he started going through the Bible. Moses, the prophets, pointing out all that had been prophesied about him. It was amazing. It was as if he was trying to get us to explore the Bible, the story for ourselves, to discover him in it, but also to discover our part in it. Do you know what I mean? It's incredible. And as he talked, I remember feeling a burning inside. And I don't mean it was about the lamb curry from last night, but we still didn't get it. Looking back, I suppose I thought of reading the Bible as something to do with knowledge about my head. But he wanted to connect with my heart. Discover God's voice in the story. How he was part of it. To understand more of what was God doing at that time, there and then, and for that matter today. And then we arrived at Emmaus, our home. And this stranger was going to leave us. Can you imagine if we'd let him go at that point? We'd allow Jesus just to walk out of our lives. You know, if we'd said, well, we've got something better to do, sorry. Thankfully, we didn't. Please don't make that mistake. Stay with us, we said. That was one of the good things that we said. Stay with us. That's always a good prayer, isn't it? And as we sat down to eat, he took bread and he broke it. Now, we hadn't been there on that Last Supper, as we call it now, where he'd broken the bread and he talked about his body. He drunk wine and talked about his blood, but we'd seen him break bread often enough. Every day, giving thanks. Yeah, and we'd seen him feed 5,000 as well. That was quite something. And now here he was, breaking bread. And it was in that our eyes were opened. It all suddenly made sense. His death, his resurrection. We knew for certain, enough to stake our lives on it. And then he was gone. Just like that. But he was and he wasn't. Because our hearts were beating faster. And we ran back to tell everyone in the city, 7 miles in the dark, oh yes. But now our eyes were opened. It's as if it was no longer dark. We just had to tell everyone the good news. Jesus was alive and he was there with us. With us. Jesus with us. And you know what? By his Holy Spirit, he still is. As we walk through our journeys, our different journeys through life, in the times of joy and also in the times of sadness, as we meet together or as we're separated, as we read the Bible, as we go to work, as we go to the shops, as we welcome strangers, as we share food and break bread, Jesus is there with us. But do we recognize him? Do we listen to him? Will you spot him in your day-to-day life? Today, tomorrow, the next day? And how will you respond?